The void stretched infinitely, a vast ocean of darkness dotted with distant pinpricks of starlight. In this abyss, a lone vessel glided through the currents of space, its engines humming with a steady pulse. Vanguard was a testament to human ambition, a long-range exploratory ship, its hull scarred with the echoes of past encounters, its AI core humming with ceaseless calculations. The mission was simple: investigate the anomaly, chart the system, return with data. It was never that simple. Captain Elias Ormond sat rigid in his command chair, eyes locked on the planet looming before them. Echo 9, unmapped, unregistered, impossible. Yet there it was, an emerald gem adrift in a sunless system, its atmosphere shimmering with an eerie iridescence. Planets didn't just appear in deep space, not without explanation. Dr. Riva Malik, xenobotanist and biologist, leaned forward, her fingers flicking through holographic displays. The scans made no sense. The atmosphere was rich in oxygen, the flora abundant. It shouldn't exist, not here, not this far from any viable sun. And yet her instruments sang of a thriving biosphere, one that felt disturbingly familiar. Lieutenant Jasper Holt shifted beside her, his posture tight with unease. He had spent years as security for planetary expeditions, but this was different. There were no recorded expeditions to this system, no crashed vessels, no ancient ruins of forgotten civilizations, just a single world where no world should be. It felt wrong. Then the whisper came, soft, faint, a ripple through the static of their comms, a voice drifting like a phantom through the ship's frequencies. Welcome home. Silence fell, a sharp, unnatural thing. Ormond's gaze snapped toward Sci-Fi, the ship's AI core, its crystalline interface flickering with unreadable calculations. He waited. Sci-Fi always had an answer. This time it hesitated. Repeat transmission, Ormond ordered. The static returned, warping into something impossibly delicate, something human. You left us behind. A breath, a heartbeat. Then Malik's voice, barely above a whisper. That was in English. The descent through the planet's atmosphere was smoother than it had any right to be. As the Vanguard's landing thrusters roared against the alien winds, the landscape came into full, terrible focus. The forests stretched endlessly, towering, trees with bioluminescent veins, their canopies rippling with pulses of amber and emerald light. The ground was covered in moss so thick it seemed to breathe, shifting in rhythmic waves as if the planet itself were alive. Above them, the sky churned with colors unshackled from the laws of nature. Blues that bled into violets, swirling with iridescent hues that did not belong to any known spectrum. Then there was the sound. Not the wind, not the creaking of trees. Something deeper, something woven into the fabric of the air itself. Whispers. Holt gripped his rifle a little tighter. Malik's hands trembled as she activated her scanner. Ormond exhaled slowly, stepping forward into the unknown. Their boots pressed into the moss, and the earth pulsed beneath them. Sci-Fi's drone followed overhead, its sensors drinking in, every anomaly, every impossible reading. The air smelled familiar, like rain-soaked earth, like home. Malik moved to a nearby tree, pressing her gloved hand against its bark. Warm, almost feverish. The bioluminescence brightened under her touch, pulsing in time with. She jerked her hand back. The tree was sinking to her heartbeat. Then, the whisper came again, curling through the air like the breath of something vast and unseen. Do you still dream? Malik recoiled. Holt raised his weapon. Ormond's fingers twitched toward his communicator, though no call for extraction would answer the questions clawing at his mind. Sci-Fi, Ormond said, voice tight. Tell me that's an environmental anomaly, some kind of audio distortion. The AI hesitated before responding, its synthetic voice carrying a weight that should not have been possible. Negative, Captain. The sound waves originate from the trees. The trees whispered again. We remember you. Something deep in Ormond's chest tightened. an unease that settled in the marrow of his bones. Malik's scanner trembled in her hands, her mind racing through hypotheses that all ended in the same impossible conclusion. Holt exhaled sharply, muttering under his breath, "This isn't right. We shouldn't be here." And yet, the planet whispered back, "But you are." The further they moved into the forest, the deeper the unease curled within them. The landscape was shifting, not physically, but something unseen pressed against their minds, nudging at long-buried memories, evoking déjà vu where there should be none. Then Cypher's voice broke through the tension. "Captain, I have identified a biometric anomaly." A pause, sharp and heavy. "The genetic patterns embedded in the flora contain a 98% match to human DNA." Silence. This time it was suffocating. Malik's stomach twisted. Holt's grip on his weapon was white-knuckled. Ormond forced his voice into something steady. "That's impossible. Humans have never been here." Cypher's next words shattered that fragile lie. "Correction, Captain. Humans have been here before, and they never left." The trees pulsed. The whispers deepened, and somewhere beyond the canopy, the wind carried the sound of something moving, something watching, something waiting. The whispers did not stop. They did not grow louder, nor did they recede. They simply remained, threading themselves into the silence like an unseen breath, coiling around the senses, pushing against the fragile walls of sanity. Ormond forced his focus on the immediate, securing the perimeter, maintaining formation, and keeping the team's mounting dread from fracturing into panic. But the weight of the impossible clung to them. Malik's scanner flickered erratically, its readings spiking into absurdities before collapsing into gibberish. The planet rejected their attempts at understanding. "We need a sample," she said, her voice hollow. She reached for a blade, knelt beside a tree, and pressed its edge into the bark. The moment the steel touched the surface, the whispers changed. Not words, but something more profound. A wave of emotion surged through them all. Melancholy, longing, something vast and inhuman struggling to be understood. And then the tree bled. A thick, crimson sap oozed from the incision, the scent of iron saturating the air. Malik recoiled. Holt raised his rifle. Ormond's voice was a razor's edge. "Back away." The forest shuddered. Not the wind, not movement. The entire forest. The moss rippled outward like a stone cast into still water. The trees trembled, not from the impact of some external force, but in response. And then the forest spoke. Not a whisper, not a fragment. A voice, resonant and singular, folding over itself in layered echoes. "We hurt." Malik scrambled back. Holt's finger hovered over the trigger. Cypher's drone pulsed with a warning signal. Ormond forced himself to remain still. "Who are you?" The response came not from the trees, not from the ground, but from inside, their own heads. "You know us." A pressure built behind their eyes, a foreign presence peeling through layers of consciousness, rifling through thoughts, sifting through memories as if searching for something it had lost. Holt gritted his teeth. "Captain." A shadow moved, not a trick of the light, not a shifting branch. A form, humanoid but wrong, twisted, elongated, grown rather than born. Its limbs moved unnaturally, its bark-like flesh shifting with each step. But it was the face that stopped Ormond cold. Not alien, not unknown, human. The features were warped, stretched by time and something unspoken. But the eyes, they were unmistakably human eyes, and they were watching him. "You left us behind," the creature said, and this time it did not whisper. It accused. Holt's grip on his weapon tightened, his pulse a hammer against his ribs. The thing before them wasn't just humanoid. It was human, or it had been once. The stretched and weathered features, the flicker of something knowing in its gaze. This wasn't some alien mimicry. Ormond spoke first, his voice measured but tight. "Who are you?" The creature's bark-like lips barely moved, but the answer came not in sound, but as a weight in their minds. Memories. Fragments of pain, isolation, betrayal. Malik gasped, stepping back as her knees nearly buckled. It's in my head, she whispered. Cypher's drone pulsed with rapid calculations, scanning, analyzing, trying to understand. The AI's voice cut through the growing tension. Captain, the genetic markers are conclusive. This entity shares 98.7% DNA similarity with Homo sapiens. Silence swallowed them whole. Malik's breath hitched. That's not possible. The creature took another slow step forward, its wooden joints creaking. The moss beneath its feet pulsed outward, responding to its presence like a living nerve. System. You left us behind, it repeated. But the tone had changed. Less accusation, more sorrow. Ormond forced himself to speak, to ask the question clawing at his mind. Who left you? The trees breathed in unison, their luminescent veins flaring with a synchronized pulse. The presence in their minds shifted, unspooling fragmented images, flashes of a ship long before Vanguard, a desperate transmission, hands reaching for help that never came. Cypher processed the data faster than human minds could. Captain, the AI said, its tone eerily neutral. Cross-referencing with classified archives. There was an undocumented colonial mission to this sector over 200 years ago. The ship, Eden's Wake, was declared lost. No known survivors. Holt's eyes narrowed. You're saying these things, are from a colony ship? Malik's voice was barely above a whisper. Or what's left of them. The creature's gaze did not waver. We were forgotten. Ormond clenched his jaw. This was spiraling too fast, the weight of revelation pressing against him from all sides. Malik shook her head, horror dawning in her expression. But that's impossible. No human could survive 2 centuries here. Not without... She turned back to the trees, to the pulse running through them, to the warmth of the bark, the whispering voices, not without becoming something else. A deep, resonant shudder rippled through the forest. More shadows moved beyond the bioluminescent glow, figures emerging from the depths of the woods. Tall, twisted, once human forms. Some more deformed than others. Some barely recognizable as people at all. Holt raised his rifle. Captain, I don't like this. Ormond held up a hand. Stand down. The whispers returned, wrapping around them, filling the spaces between thought and reality. We did not die, the voices murmured. The planet took us in. It remembered us. It made us part of itself. Malik exhaled sharply, her mind working through the implications. This planet doesn't just store memories, it absorbs them. It integrates the consciousness of anything that lingers too long. She looked back at Ormond. That's why they knew English. That's why they recognized us. Holt shook his head. You're telling me this planet, what, converted them, like some kind of living archive? A moment of silence. Then the entity in front of them whispered, Join us. A sickening stillness filled the air. Holt took a step back. Nope. No. Hell no. But the forest was closing in, the whispers intensifying, pressing into their minds. The trees bent toward them, expectant. Hungry. Malik's scanner beeped wildly, her face going pale as she read the data. Captain, she choked. The electromagnetic field. We're being pulled in. Ormond didn't hesitate. Fall back to the ship. They turned, pushing through the pulsating moss, but the world was shifting around them, the trees twisted unnaturally, their trunks rearranging to block their path, the forest restructuring itself in real time. And then the voices screamed. A tidal wave of sound, grief, rage, and desperation slammed into them all at once. Malik collapsed, to her knees. Holt fired a shot into the trees, the bullet splintering bark that bled red. The forest howled in response, the human-like entities convulsing, their bodies cracking and twisting in agony. Ormond grabbed Malik, hauling her up as Cypher's drone blared an alert. Captain, the AI warned. If we do not evacuate immediately, we will be unable to... The whispers shifted. The weight in their minds changed. Not pleading, not anger. A command. Stay. And for a moment, Ormond felt it. A pull, deep in his bones, an ache in his soul, a warmth unlike anything he had ever known. A sensation of belonging. He clenched his fists, forcing himself to move. Run! They broke free, sprinting toward the landing site as the trees twisted and reached for them, roots clawing up from the ground. The ship's ramp was lowering, Sci-Fi already engaging emergency protocols. Holt grabbed Malik and shoved her inside. As Ormond threw himself forward, his breath ragged, his heartbeat a war drum in his ears. The moment his boots hit the metal floor, he barked the order. Sci-Fi, go! The ship's thrusters roared, lifting them from the ground as the forest screamed in unison. Through the viewport, they saw it, the entire planet shifting beneath them, the trees reaching skyward, their whispers turning into something else. Something like a name, something like a warning. And then they were gone. The ship roared through the atmosphere, rattling against unseen forces that clawed at its hull like spectral hands unwilling to let them leave. Inside the cockpit, alarms blared in frantic succession. Gravity fluctuations, electromagnetic interference, biometric anomalies. The planet was fighting them, or worse, calling them back. Ormond's grip on the console was white-knuckled as he barked at Sci-Fi. Maximize thrusters. Get us into orbit now. The AI's voice remained steady, though its calculations were anything but. Structural integrity at risk. The planet's electromagnetic field is attempting to synchronize with our... The ship lurched violently. Holt was thrown against the bulkhead, Malik barely catching herself against a seat. The viewport flickered as static crawled across their displays. And then, the whispers returned. Not over the comms, not from the planet, inside their heads. Why do you run? Malik gasped, clutching her skull as if trying to keep something out. It's in my mind. It's pushing into... Ormond forced his thoughts into a wall, an instinctual resistance to the foreign presence pressing into his consciousness. Sci-Fi, isolate the neural link in our biointerfaces. Shut down all non-critical systems if you have to. The AI obeyed, sending an electric ripple through the ship as unnecessary circuits powered down. The oppressive weight in their minds lessened, but it didn't disappear. Holt exhaled sharply, shaking his head. This planet, it's more than just alive. It's a damn consciousness. Ormond's gaze flicked back to the viewport. The world beneath them was changing, its forests twisting into unfamiliar shapes, entire landscapes shifting, rearranging, as if the planet itself was rewriting its own existence. Then Sci-Fi spoke, its tone lacking its usual precision. Captain, we have an anomaly. Ormond turned. The biometric scanner flickered erratically, red lines pulsing across the screen. It was detecting life signs. On the ship, his stomach twisted. Confirm count. Silence. Then, there are 5 life signatures. Aboard. A chill lanced through the room. Holt's face went slack. No, that's not, we're only 4. There's no... Then Malik screamed. They turned just in time to see her reeling away from the entrance to the corridor, her face pale, her eyes wide with terror. Ormond reached for his weapon, but the moment he turned the corner, it was standing, there. The thing that had spoken to them in the forest. The one with human eyes. The one that had said, "You left us behind." But now it stood inside the ship, unmoving, watching. Ormond's breath came slow and even, his mind fighting to process the impossible. They had left. They had escaped, and yet it was here. How? Holt's voice cracked. How the hell did it? The air grew thick, the ship's walls groaning under an unseen force. The creature took a slow step forward. No hostility. No aggression, just certainty. You think you have left, it said. But you were never separate. The words slithered through the air, bypassing sound, embedding themselves directly into thought. Ormond leveled his weapon. Stay where you are. The creature did not stop. Holt swore under his breath, taking aim. Malik had gone completely still, her chest rising and falling in rapid, shallow breaths. Cypher's voice crackled back to life. "Captain, the entity is not physically present." Ormond's finger hovered over the trigger. "Explain." "It is," Cypher's processor's word, calculations firing in nanoseconds. "It is a projection, a manifestation of the planet's consciousness. It has imprinted onto us." The realization struck like a hammer. They hadn't escaped the planet had come with them. Ormond felt his pulse hammering against his ribs. "If it's not physically here, then how do we stop it?" "The connection is neural," Cypher responded. "It is using the residual imprint it made on your minds to maintain its presence." Malik's voice came weak, but firm. "Then we break the connection." Ormond's mind raced. There was only one way to sever a neural link. Of this magnitude, a system-wide EMP pulse. A hard reboot of every cognitive interface, including Cypher itself. But the cost would be high. They would be blind, deaf, and defenseless for a full 30 seconds. And if it didn't work, the creature took another step forward, its bark-like, flesh shifting, those human eyes never looking away, never blinking. "You were always part of us," it whispered. Ormond made the call. "Cypher, trigger the pulse." The ship's lights exploded in a flash, and then darkness, a void deeper than space itself. No sound, no sight, no whispers. For 30 seconds, they existed in nothing. Then, slowly, the systems flickered back online. Malik gasped for breath. Holt's weapon was still raised, his body tense and shaking. And the creature? Gone. No trace, no residual energy. The biometric scanner returned to 4 life signs. It had worked. They had severed the link. Ormond let out a breath he hadn't realized. He was holding. But even as the ship stabilized, the screens returning to normal, something in his gut refused to settle. Because outside, through the viewport, the planet had stopped shifting. As if it was watching. As if it had merely let them go. For now. The ship hung in orbit, silent, save for the distant hum of cooling thrusters. The tension in the cabin had not lifted, even as the planet below remained still, no longer shifting, no longer whispering. Ormond sat in his chair, his hands clasped together, staring at the displays without really seeing them. Holt was pacing, his boots echoing through the steel corridors, his rifle still slung across his back like he expected something to crawl out of the vents. Malik sat motionless at her station, eyes locked on the data scrolling across her screen. It was gone. At least that's what the readings said. No anomalous energy signatures. No unexplained electromagnetic pulses. No whispering voices inside their heads. Just a planet, eerily Earth-like, adrift in an empty system where no world should be. And yet, Ormond didn't believe it. Not entirely. Cypher had rebooted completely, its artificial consciousness temporarily severed and restored in a clean state. The AI had no memory of what transpired during the pulse, only the hard data it had collected beforehand. "Captain," Cypher's voice finally spoke, breaking the fragile silence. "Preliminary analysis confirms no remaining neural links between the crew and the planetary entity." A pause. Calculated. "However, I am detecting residual anomalies in your biometric scans," Malik inhaled sharply. "Residual? Traces of neural interference. Nothing active, nothing hostile." The AI hesitated, an unusual occurrence for a machine. "It may simply be an echo." The choice of words sent a chill down Ormond's spine. Holt grunted, rubbing a hand down his face. "So what? We're haunted now." "No," Malik whispered. "Not haunted. Marked." The silence stretched again. Ormond knew what had to come next. "Cypher, compile all data collected on Echo 9. Encrypted under Level 7 clearance. No transmissions, no external access. This information doesn't leave Vanguard." Holt frowned. You're locking it? Yes. Malik turned from her console. Captain, this is a scientific breakthrough. We've encountered a sentient, possibly post-human intelligence. We can, Ormond said, his tone leaving no room for argument. And we will. Malik's lips parted, but she didn't speak. She knew why. Because some things weren't meant to be found. Holt exhaled, shaking his head. So what now? We pretend this never happened? Ormond leaned back in his chair, eyes still locked on the planet below. The swirling forests, the unnatural glow, the stillness that felt too much like waiting. We leave, he said. And we never come back. Hours later, the ship's engines roared as Vanguard finally, mercifully, pulled away from the planet's gravity well. As they ascended, the world grew smaller, its eerie glow fading into the vast nothingness of space. And yet the further they traveled, the heavier the weight in Ormond's chest became. It wasn't just unease. It was a feeling of being watched. Cypher's voice crackled to life again. Captain, we are now outside the planet's gravitational influence. FTL drive is primed for activation. Ormond hesitated. He shouldn't have. He should have given the order immediately, but something in him resisted. He shook it off. Engage. A surge of power rippled through the ship as the drive activated. The stars outside stretched into elongated streaks, and in the blink of an eye, the planet was gone, left behind in the endless abyss. Only then did Ormond allow himself to breathe. Malik stood from her station, rubbing her arms as if trying to shake off an invisible presence. Holt, for the first time since landing, slumped into a chair, exhaustion finally winning over adrenaline. Cypher's systems whirred softly, running post-jump diagnostics. We are en route to Fleet Command. Estimated arrival in 72 hours. All systems nominal. Ormond nodded. Good. He forced himself to push away the unease. To believe it was over, then, a faint whisper. So soft, it barely registered. So distant, it could have been a memory. But it wasn't. We will find you. Ormond's blood ran cold. The ship continued its silent journey through the void. But deep down he knew the truth. They hadn't escaped. They had only bought themselves time. The stars stretched endlessly, cold and indifferent. Vanguard hurtled through the void, light years away from Echo 9, its crew weary, haunted by an encounter they could neither explain nor forget. Ormond sat alone in his quarters, staring at the reflection in the small viewport. His own face looked back at him, but something in his eyes felt foreign. He rubbed his temples. The whispers had stopped. No anomalous readings. No signs of infection. Cypher's diagnostics had confirmed it. They were free. So why did he still feel watched? A soft chime interrupted his thoughts. Captain, Cypher's voice called over the intercom. Incoming transmission from Fleet Command. Urgent debrief requested. Of course. He exhaled slowly, pushing himself upright. He already knew what was coming. Questions, demands, orders to explain what had happened, why the data was locked, why they had fled instead of investigating further. He didn't have the answers they wanted, only the truth. And the truth was dangerous. He stepped into the corridor, passing Malik's lab. The door was slightly ajar. He hesitated, then knocked. She looked up from her console, dark circles under her eyes. She hadn't slept either. You feel it too, don't you? She asked. He didn't answer. He didn't have to. She turned the monitor toward him. The display showed bio readings from the crew. Normal, healthy. But then she tapped another file. An overlay. A faint, undetectable signal buried in the data. We're still marked, she said, voice barely above a whisper. Ormond's jaw tightened. He knew it. Holt walked by, pausing at the door. What's going on? Neither of them spoke. Then the ship shuddered. Not turbulence, not mechanical failure. Something external. Cypher's voice cut through the silence. Captain, long range, Sensors detect an unknown transmission. Ormon's heart pounded. Source? A pause. Then, coordinates trace back to Sol system. Earth. Malik stiffened. Holt swore under his breath. Ormond stepped toward the console, dreading the answer even as he asked, "What's the message?" The screen flickered. The whisper returned. "We remember you." Ormond's breath caught in his throat. The signal wasn't coming from Echo 9. It was coming from home.